Hey, here's a good joke. Apparently fanboys and girls that solely judge comic book films based on how much it validates their loyalties through pandering references so that they can turn to their friends and say how they totally got it and be in with a crowd, and that don't even view these things objectively as movies in and of themselves, think they are in any sort of position to chastise professional film critics. Ah. There is no way to discuss Suicide Squad, Warner Bros.' first villain-centric action outing focusing on characters from the DC universe, without saying up front that what we have here is the dictionary definition of the word mess. And it's the kind of mess that can only be comprehended once you consider what most likely happened to the film before its release. We all knew that something had to have been going on when the only impression we got from any of the trailers was one of tone, and we especially knew that something was up when that one constant wasn't even staying consistent. The first teaser exhibited a particularly dark, off-kilter and twisted aesthetic, one that I assume matched director David Ayer's vision, while the later trailers seemed far more reminiscent of other, more recently successful comic book movies, one in particular, edited to pop songs and emphasising light-hearted humour. So what happened? Well, it hasn't really been confirmed by anyone, but given all the evidence suggesting so, I'm willing to just conclude that Batman v Superman happened. The film now playing in cinemas is an obvious casualty of Warner Bros. Effectively hitting the panic button. The whole enterprise has clearly been hijacked by the studio in a mad and desperate rush to rectify the idea that the DC movies are too grim and bleak for their own good, by quickly moving to rewrite, reshoot and recut certain scenes to better match that general fun-going aesthetic that they discovered tested well with fans. And if that's not what happened, then I'd love to know what did, because it's exactly what the end result comes off as. A colossally awkward and clueless mishmash of two very different movies struggling for screen time. And as such, everything else suffers. The characters are as dimensionless as you could get them, the story is painstakingly non-existent, and the film's final cut has been choppily edited to disastrous effects. We all know what happens when a director speaks up about studio interference regarding their projects, and I suspect that Ayer does too, since he recently came out to cover his own behind and say that the cut now playing in theatres is his intended version, despite acknowledging that Warner Bros. Did indeed cut many scenes, and that any last minute workarounds were in service to the flow of the movie. This would seem to make sense, as the only goal that Suicide Squad seems to aspire towards from a creative standpoint is to keep clicking along at a fast pace before you have time to process any kind of boredom. I'll say this, however disorientating the finished result may be, it does allow the movie to come out reasonably entertaining enough to still be leagues better than both Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice, despite arguably being technically worse than both. So it's not much of a recommendation, but yeah, I could sit through this one, so getting better, I guess? The film concerns itself with Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis, a US intelligence officer, assembling a team of what we're told are a dangerous and incarcerated group of supervillains for a top-secret mission, and once armed with government weapons, Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Captain Boomerang, Killer Croc, El Diablo and others must learn to work together to defeat the enemy in the currently evacuated playground of New York City. Who is the enemy, you ask? Well, this is where the film starts to trip over its own premise. You may have noticed that in that description I didn't mention Cara Delevingne as Enchantress, real name June Moon, possessed by the spirit of an evil witch. The movie sets her up to be one of the squad, and the marketing would seem to imply that role, but soon reveals that she's actually our antagonist, and the reason she becomes so is because the government has done such a crap job of maintaining her that she manages to wander off on her own and reincarnate the spirit of her dead brother to turn a bunch of citizens into these weird alien-looking soldiers and shoot a big blue laser thing into the sky for convoluted reasons. I think because of something to do with dimensions, but honestly, I can't really remember. And yes, it's exactly as self-defeating and clumsily orchestrated as it sounds. The threat these people have to stop is something they are directly responsible for. The initial problem, besides the rampant cutting every few seconds, is structure. Whereas other films with a cast of largely unknown characters might establish their quirks and nuances through revealing dialogues and interactions throughout the main plot, Suicide Squad opts to execute all that exposition through an extended 30-minute prologue detailing each individual backstory. And then even though this section takes up about a solid third of the film, it still manages to tell us shockingly little about any of them, since none of these sequences have been allowed to play out coherently. For example, the flashback regarding Harley Quinn should be easy to follow, but because it keeps cutting back and forth every 5 seconds between something like 10 different scenes which were obviously meant to go on longer and have been severely cut back, the entire thing comes across more like a reality-questioning drug trip than a quick origin story. Oh, but it's okay because they used this opportunity to show Margot Robbie in the original, far better looking Bruce Timm design, as if to ball tickle the fans over a movie that we never get to see. Screw you. The actual plot doesn't seem to begin until around the 45-minute mark, once the film finally decides that it's done setting everything up. The characters never transcend beyond these broad one-sentence matter-of-fact descriptions. Deadshot has a daughter, Harley Quinn loves the Joker, Captain Boomerang likes pink unicorns, which the film seems to think is really funny solely because it's weird, etc. The only one that comes close to any kind of depth is probably El Diablo, the fire-wielding ex-con who accidentally murdered his family and who absolutely refuses to use his abilities under any circumstances. Unfortunately, it's all a setup for an emotional conclusion which couldn't be less earned. Otherwise, folks like Boomerang and Croc just kind of lounge about in the background. It's very undefined how bad these people are, and the film really chickens out on making any of them truly despicable. I'll say that as far as casting goes, it's nice to see Robbie relishing in the role of Harley Quinn so much, despite being given such cringeworthy dialogue, and it's especially great to see Courtney finally get to sink his teeth into a charismatic role. He's legitimately enjoyable to watch as Captain Boomerang, and I buy his kind of C-grade villain attitude given his connection to the Flash. Joel Kinnamen is also around as Rick Flag to keep the team in check, and while his romance with June Moon is arguably the most glossed over B-story in recent memory, he does manage to pull off a more convincing range of emotions here than when he was human in the RoboCop remake. Unfortunately, a big miscast turns out to be Will Smith. Fine actor, sure, but all we see the entire time Deadshot is on screen is Will Smith, a persona we often associate with charming protagonists, none of which is helped by the fact that the only beat he's given to do anything with is this tedious beat about his bloody daughter. Having said that though, it does lead to the funniest visual in the whole thing, where he's about to shoot Enchantress, and the face of Deadshot Jr. crying takes up the whole frame to say, "Don't do it, Daddy!" Jared Leto's Joker is also around, who's clearly another casualty of the final cut, considering he's front and centre on all of the posters, yet in the actual film for about 7 minutes, and look, I get that following the last guy would be no easy task for anyone, but he's just not very good. The whole thing reeks of trying to do something different. His performance never becomes anything other than an attempt to not be Jack Nicholson or Heath Ledger, and as such the man never becomes anyone along the way, just eccentric and weird. I'll give him credit in that he's not really in the film long enough to develop the character, but the whole radically different de-Antwoord get-up making him look way too concerned about his own image just rids the guy of so much threat. But really the film's obnoxiousness takes a whole new form in Harley Quinn, a character solely defined by a fan base of Hot Topic cosplayers. She's a loony non-superpowered human that walks around hitting people with a baseball bat, but because this isn't just any character, this is Harley Quinn, the film treats her like this impossibly threatening supervillain who can apparently take on 5 guards at once and gets her own secluded prison cell because she's just so damn dangerous. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm not buying it. The whole thing screams of pandering. The movie presents her in a sexier, dirtier outfit, in keeping with Warner Brothers' insistence to adapt every bad version of every character's costume, and paints hers and the Joker's relationship as a genuine romance, as opposed to the far more nuanced and compelling original version, which explored ideas of domestic violence and unhealthy obsessions. And if the rumours are true that there were originally meant to be extended scenes highlighting those aspects and making it a vital part of her development, I'd love to challenge whoever made the call to cut all that stuff out, but keep every gratuitous moment highlighting her fucking bum. And poor Cara Delevingne too, struggling so mightily to get across some kind of performance out of this dubbed over embarrassment of a villain she's been given, that she just kind of ends up doing this weird belly dance the whole time. They're really lucky that Wonder Woman is the next film in this franchise, because she's the exact kind of female empowerment figure you're gonna need after making Lois Lane a part-time exposition machine and damsel in distress, Harley Quinn a vessel for fangirls to imagine themselves going out with a topless Jared Leto through, and Enchantress a dimensionless half-naked plot convenience. Don't even get me started on Katana, who gets nothing to do besides getting hit on by Boomerang, and who the film doesn't even attempt to give any character to until the very final few seconds approaching the closing battle. The way this film tries to get you invested in these people is just so half-assed and manipulative. Action-wise, there are effectively 3 set pieces, and none of them are particularly impressive or ambitious. Two are shot entirely in medium close-ups, so you can't really follow it very well, and the finale sees the characters conveniently silhouetted by a cloud of mist, so that you literally can't see anything. The whole film really does just feel like an excuse to have the characters engage in poorly staged fight scenes as set up for Harley Quinn to make an unfunny joke and for the audience to fake laugh out of kindness. The thing just kinda trundles along, cluelessly filling up its runtime and continuously cutting back and forth to more confusing, nondescript flashback scenes until we reach the finale, at which point its true purpose is finally cemented. It seems like hyperbole to say it, but Suicide Squad really does want to be Guardians of the Galaxy, and you can really tell that this was the ultimate notion behind most of the final changes, since none of the bright ultraviolet neon now surrounding much of its marketing campaign is anywhere to be found in what they actually shot. Most of the film is pretty bleak and set during night, but in colourful on-screen text that flies into frame and in opening and closing title sequences. Oh, the aspiration is pretty apparent earlier on anyway, when the film just keeps placing popular songs into scenes for no discernible reason, including Spirit in the Sky, a song exclusively used in Guardians, but that wasn't enough apparently. So in the final few minutes of the battle, everyone starts talking about family and friendship, and the whole thing becomes this dramatic emotional turmoil of huge gestures, and it all really does just come out of nowhere. It's a shame because there's the potential there to do something genuinely subversive or interesting with this premise, and I suspect that Ayer's original version, while probably not perfect, may at least have offered something creative or unique in that respect. Perhaps in manipulating us to care about these characters as set up for a third act twist where they each individually reveal their true natures and have the whole thing completely backfire on the government, thereby exploring notions of order versus anarchy and power plays. Nope, they just all hold hands and save the day through good old-fashioned heroics. 2016 will go down as the year when, out of all the ones that should have seemed risky and subversive, the most ballsy and mature superhero offering turned out to be the strategically calculated one from a franchise with every reason to play it safe. Heck, there are points where Amanda Waller goes to such extremes that the film implies she's just as bad as these folks, that suggests a story beat about ambiguity and dissecting that fine line between good and evil. But nope, it's just another thing that happens and that the film immediately moves right past because God forbid we let one scene run over 30 seconds. I didn't hate Suicide Squad, but I kinda feel as though I really should. Even if the cuts hadn't occurred, it's hard to imagine there being much more reverence or respect for these characters, or a version of the film that didn't spend its entire runtime pandering to its audience, and not even the best editors would be able to turn in a working flick out of the absurd amounts of flashback footage shot. At the end of the day, the piece never realises what it wants to be or who it's even for, and it is astonishing how much incompetency Warner Brothers have demonstrated with these past couple of movies especially, considering how much they supposedly pride themselves on being a director-driven studio. Having said all that, I wasn't bored. It feels weird when the best thing that I can say about a movie is that it didn't make me so miserable that I'd have to go off and engage in a Rocky IV style training montage just to come back and review it, but when you look at its predecessors, yep, I guess this'll have to do for now. Cheers for watching guys, and as always if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.